All right, can everybody hear me? All right, good. Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jonas Snyder. I'm a senior here, as Chad explained. And for my SLE, I wrote a book. Or I stand in front of you with at least half of it done. But I fully intend to finish it. Now, this book came about in a rather interesting way, and I wanted to share it with you and really what my main takeaway was. So, the first question that led to me writing a book was this: how would you classify an alien civilization? It seems completely unrelated to the subject of books, but I promise you we will get there. So fortunately, in the 1960s, a man named Kardashev, he was a science fiction writer in Russia, came up with this scale, the Kardashev scale. Now, it has three classes. The first one being a civilization that harnesses all of the power available on their planet. Now, we're currently at a 0.773, something like that on this scale, so we have a little ways to go. Now, class 2 is a civilization that harnesses all of the available energy in their solar system, of their sun, of the planets that are orbiting it. And class 3 is a civilization that harnesses all of the energy available in its galaxy. Now, this is an incredible amount of energy, and to us, this would be as a god to insects. But I was thinking, what if, and this is hypothetical, hopefully, what if a civilization, the civilization that runs our galaxy, our class 3 civilization, and again, hypothetical, but what if they came to Earth? What would they do? You know, obviously, they could, A, destroy us completely and totally, but, you know, what if they didn't? What if they, as a civilization, what if somehow it was necessary for something to become a society, you know, a race to become a society in order to become as class 3 civilization? So I was just thinking about that. So it would need to develop its own system of ethics. It would need to develop rules and contracts that bind people together, bind these aliens together into their civilization. And so I was thinking about this, moral aliens. That's interesting. So what if moral aliens, a moral, hyper-technologically advanced alien race, came to Earth? What would they do? What if they were here to see if we were worth keeping around? What if they were going around as a farmer does to their field? You know, using their sickle to cut down wheat, you know? What if they were going around to pick out who should survive based upon their ideas? So that led me to the question, how do you measure morality? Now, this is a rather interesting and quite big field that is based around this question, but moral psychology has a few ways to look at this question. The first being Lawrence Kohlberg's scale of moral development. Now, this scale, and obviously I want to clarify this, there are decisions that we make for no real discernible reason. And those don't apply to these scales that I'm about to show you. They are rather decisions that are outside of the ideas of morality, because we're not actually thinking about the decisions before we do them. So, with that in mind, Lawrence Kohlberg was a psychologist in the 60s who he took a group of young males from early childhood and saw them all the way to their late 20s, and he looked at the way that they made moral decisions. And he came up with this scale based upon the idea that goodness is justice. So, level 1 being what is just is that I do what I do because I don't want to get in trouble. This is quite simple. I mean, animals behave by this behavior, and really almost any insect or anything that is fighting for its survival obeys this idea. Now, the second level, it's I want a reward, and that's why I do what I do. Level 3, I want to please someone. I want someone to affirm me. That's why I do what I do. That is what is just and that is what is good. Level 4 being I follow the rules. The rules are always right. Or, you know, I don't want to get in trouble. That could be another aspect of that. But anyway, my point being is that you get all the way from level 5, I respect others, I have a contract with others, I understand others' autonomy, their ability to make choices, and so I make my decisions based upon that idea. Now level 6 is I have my own personal code of behavior. I understand that sometimes the rules aren't the right way to do things. Sometimes there are higher levels of morality than simply the laws or the rules. Now, anyway, this is what Lawrence Kohlberg came up with in the 60s. And what he found is that people progressed up this scale from level 1 to all the way up to level 6 because they thought about what they were doing before they did it. And that's makes sense, it's intuitive, but it's an important thing, and I want you all to remember that. I'll get back to that, but as I mentioned before, Lawrence Kohlberg was a psychologist, and he researched mostly males. In fact, that males were almost all that encompassed his study. And so one of his postgraduate students, Carol Gilligan, who was looking through his studies while he was doing them, she had a moment where she was asking these young males what they thought about the Vietnam draft. And they weren't willing to talk about it because it wasn't compatible with the idea of justice that they had been taught for this entire time. So she realized that at this time at least, I mean, this is coming after the 50s, the Pax Americana, there were very strict gender roles. And so what she realized, what she theorized, was that when we put people into these boxes, they develop separate moral development scales. So this she came up with by doing mostly females in her study. And she did this in the 60s and 70s. So level 1 being that my desires come before other people's desires. This is the ethic of individual survival. My needs are more important than anyone else's. Level 2, and again, people progress up this the same way as before, others' desires come before my own. Self-sacrifice is what is just, what is good. Level 3 is the balance between these two ideas, that my desires sometimes come before others' desires, but I need to keep an awareness of other people's desires as well. And in your decision-making, you try not to hurt either party, whether self or others. Now, these two ideas, the Kardashev scale and these two scales of moral development, are fairly big ideas, and they don't seem immediately connected to books. And so when I was thinking about these two things, I asked myself, where am I on this scale? And I ask you all to ask the same question and give an honest answer. Where are you on these two scales? And my point being is that a race of moral hyper-technologically advanced aliens, if they judged us by these scales, where would humanity fall? That's the inspiration for my book. Now, I accomplished a sort of outside perspective, looking at humanity critically from a bird's eye view, to term it that way. And so I did this through an allegory of this town, the town of Babel, in which there are people from every different race, culture, creed, language. All of these differences, they are crammed into one city. Quite a beautiful one. It's got high mountain ranges to either side, and it's up next to the ocean. But the main problem in Babel, and I'm trying to pull from my own experiences, my own perspective on modern affairs, is corruption. A wealthy few control or influence greatly the actions and the legislation that are put through by the government of this town. And so what their actions end up doing, what the legislation that they pull through ends up doing, is it ends up displacing a great deal of the residents of Babel into impoverished slums out on the outskirts of Babel. Now this goes on and on and on over the course of the book, until the very end, when the slums rise up, they revolt, and they overthrow the people that have been oppressing them, but they burn down their entire town in the process. Now, what I'm trying to communicate with this idea is that revolutions don't always serve us. They don't always make things better. They too often take away the bad by also taking away the good. Now, it's a nuanced point, and I think that that's really the moral of the story, at least the first moral. Now, this is built upon when the main character is digging through the ashes of his former town, and he finds layer upon layer of ash in the dirt below Babel. Babel's done this before. It's burned itself down periodically over time, and what I'm trying to communicate with this is that we repeat the same cycles of behavior. We have been doing them for thousands and thousands of years, conceivably since we first had societies. We continue to fall victim to the same problems. Now, if you study history, and if you live long enough, I think that you'll agree with me in that we do repeat things. We repeat cycles of behavior and we fall into the same pitfalls. Now, the only change with this, and it is a rather extreme point, we don't generally burn down the entire planet, and that's what my allegory is saying. It's being watched by these moral, hyper-technologically advanced aliens. This is all a simulation. This book is. It's all a simulation in which these people are living out their lives and humanity is going through and doing what it does. So anyway, my takeaway from this, and it's entirely my opinion, but I hope that some of you will agree with me, is that self-reflection is key. People cannot be forced to change. People cannot be forced, on the whole, to do anything. Not really. They will end up rebelling. They will end up revolting. The thing is that we're all individuals, and that's the only way to really solve any problem, any big problem that we keep falling into, is realizing that we have our own role in this great epic of humanity. We have our own role to play, and we're individuals and we can make our own choices. Self-reflection is key. That's my point. Individuals are the only people that can change themselves, and reflection is the way to do that. Taking a good hard look at yourself, at what you do, why you do it, where you are on those morality scales. Taking a look at that and thinking about it and trying to improve, trying to become a better person. That's what my takeaway is. Without it, we simply do not change, not as people, individuals, or as humanity as a whole. Now, I realize that this is a fairly depressing idea because we are but impermanent cogs in a Leviathan machine to be grandiose about it. But I believe that there is always hope with these sorts of things. And there's a quote from Carl Sagan that I believe is not altogether inappropriate for this sort of occasion. We, who cannot even put our own planetary home in order, riven with rivalries and hatred, are we to venture out into space? By the time we are ready to settle even the nearest other planetary systems, we will have changed. The simple passage of so many generations will have changed us. Necessity will have changed us. After all, we are an adaptable species. It will not be we who reach Alpha Centauri and the other nearby stars. It will be a species very like us, but with more of our strengths and fewer of our weaknesses. More confident, far-seeing, and prudent. For all our failings, despite all our limitations and fallibilities, we humans are capable of greatness. Thank you all.